Good afternoon, everyone. I am Wendy Singer, Director of Education at Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center. On behalf of our CEO, Susan Abrams, Board of Directors, staff, and volunteers, I am honored to welcome you to today's very special program. As an institution grounded in history and lessons of the Holocaust that works to share universal lessons of humanity and generate awareness and action against injustices worldwide, we are honored to have you here today for We Dissent, the women who stood with RBG. Ruth Bader Ginsburg has often said that true and lasting change in society and law is accomplished slowly, one step at a time. Today, you're joining us for a conversation with Dean Emerita of Loyola Law School, Nina S. Appel, and the Honorable Judge Carole Kamin Bellows as they reflect upon their legal careers, what it meant to break the glass ceiling at a day and age when women accounted for less than 3% of the legal profession, and their unique relationships with the very special Notorious RBG. Our moderator today is a wonderful woman, Abby Romanek. She has been on the bench for 6 years. She sits on the Domestic Relations Division of the Circuit Court of Cook County, hearing parentage and divorce cases. Prior to her election to the bench, she practiced criminal law and medical malpractice defense, trying cases to juries. She has been active in the community for many, many years, serving on numerous boards of charitable, religious, and political organizations. She's currently on the board of the Anti-Defamation League and Sukkot Shalom, and has been on our museum board for well over a decade, serving numerous committees, and is currently vice president of our board. Abby is a member of our second generation Speakers Bureau, as the daughter of a Holocaust survivor and writer of the book currently featured on our Facebook Live program called Masterpiece Theater. The story is called Lala's Story. Without further ado, let's hear from Abby.
Good afternoon, everybody, and I'm sorry for those of you who had some trouble getting on, and hopefully some others will still get on. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce our speakers for this afternoon. First, I'd like to introduce Nina Appel. Nina joined Loyola's full-time law faculty in 1973 and went on to serve as Associate Dean from 1976 to 1983 and Dean from 1983 to 2004, and Dean Emerita from 2004 until her retirement in 2018. Nina was one of the longest serving women deans in ABA history, as well as the first woman dean. Appel was the founder of Loyola University's Chicago Center for Business Law, its nationally ranked Beasley Institute for Health Law and Policy, and co-founder of its internationally recognized Civitas Child Law Center. Under Appel's leadership, Loyola began the hugely successful Master of Jurisprudence MJ degree programs, which has launched the school ahead of the curve in online legal education. Loyola Law alumni have honored Appel with one of their highest awards, the Medal of Excellence. A former member and chair of the ABA section of legal education at admissions to the bar, the accrediting agency for all ABA approved law schools, Appel was honored with the section's Robert J. Kudak Award for her significant contributions to the collaboration for the Academy, the Bench, and the Bar. She also received her alma mater's Distinguished Columbian in Teaching Award and was named one of 10 highly influential women leaders in today's Chicago Women's 20th Century Hall of Fame. She earned an undergraduate degree from Cornell University and a JD from Columbia Law School. I am also thrilled to introduce to you Carole Bellows. Judge Bellows obtained her undergraduate degree from the University of Illinois, and her law degree from Northwestern University School of Law. She began her legal career as clerk to the Chief Judge of the Court of Claims. She worked in her husband's firm and later for Rubin and Proctor. In 1977, Judge Bellows was the first woman elected president of the Illinois State Bar Association and that was the first woman in the entire nation elected president of any state bar association. Between 1975 and 1988, she was a member of the ABA House of Delegates. During this time, Carole was chairman of the ABA section on individual rights and responsibilities. Members of her committee included Hillary Rodham Clinton and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. In 1986, Judge Bellows was appointed to the Circuit Court of Cook County, where she was elected and retained for 32 years until she retired in 2018. As a judge in the Domestic Relations Division, she was a team leader and acted as presiding judge, where she led 43 judges. Throughout her distinguished career, she was honored numerous times for her service to the bench and bar, including the CBA Award for Outstanding Service, the Northwestern University Alumni Award, the Alliance for Women's Founders Award, the award for the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers, the Illinois Judges Distinguished Award, the Jewish Judges Distinguished Award, and one of only 3 people a year given the Legal Luminary Award by the Illinois Bar Foundation and the Illinois Judges Foundation. Carole Bellows has mentored numerous judges and has been and continues to be my mentor and friend. So thank you, everybody. I'd like to start with Nina, if I could, and ask you to tell everybody about your first meeting with Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Well, I have had the privilege of knowing Ruth for such a long time. We were undergraduates together at Cornell. She was a little ahead of me, so we really didn't know one another that well. Of course, I knew of her, this brilliant, wonderful person who was ahead of me. By circumstances changing, she enrolled at Columbia in her senior year in the law school. And that was when we really got to know one another. So that was just before, it was 1958. And we've been friends ever since.
That's amazing. Carole, how is it that you came to know Ruth Bader Ginsburg?
Well, in 1975, I was the chair of the section of individual rights and responsibilities. And that was the liberal wing of the ABA, to say the least. And we tried very hard to put anti-discrimination legislation and get the ABA behind it. And among the other many resolutions that we had on anti-discrimination was the Equal Rights Amendment. And the ABA did back the passage of the Equal Rights Amendment, but Ruth was on my council that year, 75, 76, where she was very much working hard to get that last. We had 35 states that passed the ERA. We still needed 3 states, and she worked very hard to get the bar support, and she did get the bar support. We didn't get the legislatures that we needed, but we got the organized bar was an early supporter of ERA, and that's thanks to people like Ruth.
It's amazing. So Nina, can you tell us about your impressions of Ruth in law school?
Yeah. Well, during the summer, my senior year in law school, we had heard rumors that a brilliant person was transferring from Harvard Law School. And the men in the class were none too pleased because we all knew that Ruth would be at the head of the class, and it was ranked in numerical order. So whoever was number 2 would become number 3. And indeed, Ruth did come to Columbia, and we had one thing in common. We were the only married women in our class, and our husbands knew one another as well. So we established a long-lasting friendship at that time. She, of course, was always brilliant, wonderful, modest, all the characteristics that she continues to have were with her at that time.
That's wonderful. And what were your impressions of her, Carole?
Well, she was just one of these wonderful people who was such who had such great impact on trying to get us to see what's important about equal rights. And she was very, very helpful. As I say, we did get the organized bar behind the movement. It took a little bit longer, like this year, to get the 38 states to ratify the ERA. But this was back in the 1970s.
Yeah. Only 50 years.
Yes.
So Nina, has your friendship remained current with Ruth?
Yes, it has remained current. Her son, Jim Ginsburg, is the president of CD, an organization committed to supporting Chicago musicians. And as a result, Ruth periodically, each year at least, comes to Chicago. So at a minimum, I get to see her for a weekend or 2 or 3 days every year.
So I'm going to ask you this so that we get it out of the way, because I know everybody is really concerned about her health. Do you know how she's doing today?
I don't know how she's doing today, but very recently her son reported to me that she was doing very well. He said she's back on the treadmill, which I found to be very encouraging.
Okay, great. I'd like to know too about, both of you went to law school very, at an early age when there weren't very many women in law school. So Carole, can you tell us about that? You went to Northwestern. How many women were in your law school class?
Well, we had 3 that graduated from my law school class. We had a few drop in and out during the 3 years I was there, but we had 3 that actually graduated and went on to careers in law.
So what was that like, being one of only 3 women?
Well, I need to give you a little bit of history of Northwestern, because it's probably a little different than some of the other experiences like Nina had and Ruth had. Harvard did not allow women into the law school until 1950. Now, the forerunner of Northwestern Law School had the first woman graduate in the United States in 1870, and that was Ada Kepley. Ada didn't get her license until 1881, but she was the first law graduate. So we went with that history. And Ada Kepley did end up running for the Illinois Attorney General spot. Wow. In the 1880s. She didn't make it, but she did run. And also Northwestern was very forward, and they had African-American students. In fact, the icon, Ida Wells, the civil rights icon, her husband graduated in the late 1800s from Northwestern Law School and was the first Black circuit court judge in Cook County, or whatever the judges were in those days. So I entered in 1957, and the more recent history was that Dawn Clark was #1 in the law school class of 52. And she went on to become a state senator, the comptroller of Illinois, and a law professor at Northwestern. So that was 1952. And then in 1956, Katie Soule was #1 in the class. And she went on to become, her first job was as law clerk to the famous Julius Hoffman in the federal court of the famous cases of the Chicago 8, I believe it was.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Katie ended up, her husband was also an academic in law school, and she ended up as a long-term professor of torts at the schools where Ohio State University Law School and the University of Miami Law School. And she had a very distinguished career as a torts teacher.
Wow.
So I ended up with my faculty was a little softened up when I went, unlike many other stories which Nina will tell you about.
Yeah.
Okay, Nina, let's hear about.
Abby, my experience was different. When we entered, there were 12 of us in a class of 255 people, which was unusual for Columbia. They were taken aback. Where did all these women come from? I remember clearly that in my first year as a freshman, first class, an aged professor announced from the podium, "I have never called on a woman in my entire career." He was on the verge of retiring, "and I do not intend to do so this semester." Now, my students will be surprised, and I used to share this in class, our reaction, we did not know enough to be offended. I think by and large, the reaction of me and my friends was we were relieved. One class we would not get called on. But that certainly was part of the atmosphere of the law school. And sadly, many of the men felt that way as well. We were continually being challenged. Why are you taking the place of a man in the law school? Now, I will say, of the 12 women in the class, one died sadly before she graduated, but all of us ended up practicing law. I cannot, serving in some capacity, judge or academics, certainly Ruth, I cannot say that for my male classmates, many of whom never practiced. So that was, now Carole mentioned Northwestern. I'm very briefly, can't help myself, 45 years at Loyola. Loyola also had a tradition of being open to all people, women and men, not quite as early as Northwestern, but most certainly minorities and other people who wanted to enter the profession. Loyola started as an evening program. The large university state schools were always located out of urban centers. Whether intentionally or not, it prevented working people, women, minorities from studying law. The Jesuit urban law schools were open to all people and helped to change the profession. Carole's father was a teacher, professor at Loyola, so we have that connection as well.
Wow. Well, Nina, you also told us a story one day about there was one day that professor did agree to call on women. Will you tell us that story?
Professor, as he pronounced it, Goebel, and as we all called him, Professor Goebbels, because we felt he deserved that title, one day a year had what he called, it was family law, what he called Ladies' Day. And all the women in the class, however many there were in the class, would have to stand in front of the room, and he would ask the most penetrating, and I use that term appropriately, questions about what constituted rape, what constituted assault. The sole purpose, I think, looking back, was to embarrass us. So that was, he was notorious for that. He enjoyed it. We didn't, but that was his pride. Every year he did that.
Wasn't there another professor you had named Griswold?
That was Ruth. That was Ruth at Harvard. That was Dean Griswold, who was very similar. I'll say one other thing about Columbia. When I graduated, my husband was completing his PhD. And so I really wanted to stay in New York and do something at the law school. Our dean, not Dean Griswold, but our dean, Dean Warren, interviewed me. There were 4 opportunities in each year for teaching associates. They were called associates in law. Traditionally, these were men who intended to become faculty. It was a stepping stone into possibly an academic career. When Dean Warren hired me, he said, and I quote, I've never forgotten this, "I'll give you the opportunity to teach as an associate in law, but there is no opportunity for any woman to teach in a law school." And again, in my uninformed state, what I said was, "Thank you for the opportunity." I had no reason to doubt him, Abby, because I had never seen a woman faculty member, not at Cornell, and most certainly not at Columbia. So I was prepared to think, well, he's right. There's no opportunity for a faculty member in law to be a female.
But you certainly changed that.
Well, I looked up some statistics, and certainly today across the country, it turns out not only at Loyola, more than half of the students in law schools are female. And of the deans in the country, 35% are now female.
Wow.
And in fact, until just a few months ago, as I told Carole, 5 of the 6 law schools in Chicago had women deans. There was a panel and I had a chance to moderate, and it was a wonderful feeling. And I was thinking of this dean who had said there's never going to be an opportunity for a woman.
That's
So
incredible.
times have changed a little.
That's incredible. Carole, what sort of advice would you give women today that are going to law school and trying to practice law?
Well, I'd say follow your dream, because we're really taking over the profession, at least on an equal basis. And we were talking about the women judges in Illinois. Well, it was the most recent statistics we could find was like from 8 years ago. And at that point, over 40% of the judges in Cook County were women. It was less downstate, but I'm sure by today it's much improved. And I would say we're probably heading close to 50%, at least in Cook County. So we're doing well. And that I wanted to just refer to Dean Griswold for a moment.
Right.
There's the famous story about how he called all the women in the freshman class to his home for dinner and then grilled them on why they were taking up a man's place.
Right.
So I think that's in Ruth Ginsburg's documentary, but that was a legend. And I did know Erwin Griswold from the ABA, and he
Carole,
certainly did that.
I think that at that time Ruth answered so she would be better informed about her husband's work.
Yes.
God. And Griswold is the famous Griswold versus Connecticut, right? Isn't that the same Griswold?
Yes. So, and there's one other story in my situation. I didn't have a problem with my classmates, and I don't know why, but maybe because they knew I came from a family of lawyers and they never gave me a hard time. But my other classmate, who was a lovely woman, was asked by one of our other classmates, why is she taking up a man's place? She'll never practice law. She is going on her 60th year in the Department of Justice out of Washington. Her 60th year. Nobody's working at this point except my friend Barbara.
But I do have something to say.
Uh-huh.
In 1983, the American Bar Association passed a standard for accreditation, which was a non-discriminatory standard. Did I say 83? I meant 73. 1973. In other words, law schools could no longer, it was not affirmative action, but law schools could no longer discriminate against women. It's not a coincidence that in 1974 and thereafter, women came pouring into the law schools. It went from an insignificant number when Ruth and I were and Carole were in school, to suddenly there were 8%, 10%, 15%, 20%, and on and on. I think it was a result of the pent-up demand that all these women had thought, well, I'd like to be a lawyer, but there's no chance to be admitted because law schools were very hostile. So in that sense, when I was the chair, the ABA was celebrating its 100th year of involvement in legal education. And we published a book written by Susan Boyd, which traced the positive and negative things that the ABA did in regard to legal education. A positive thing was to permit women to come into law school. A negative thing was to try to get those law schools with evening divisions, part-time divisions, unaccredited. They didn't want part-time education. They didn't, frankly, want working class people to come in and ruin what was up to then a gentleman's profession. So the ABA had both a positive and at some point during its 100th year, a negative impact, in my view, on the development of legal education. But in regard to women, that was certainly a trigger. It wasn't that the law school suddenly wanted women. It was that the ABA forced them to not discriminate against women. And that was the beginning of what Carole has reported of equal representation, almost equal representation in the profession.
Right. Well, Carole, your mother was a lawyer too, wasn't she?
Yes, she was. She was admitted in approximately, I think, 1933. She went to Kent Law School,
Amazing.
but being in the middle of the Depression, she obviously did not get a job. And it should be noted that from the time the Women's Bar Association of Illinois was organized, probably in the 20s, until into the 60s, their main mission was to help their members get legal jobs. It was a big deal to have a legal job. And when I was first admitted to the bar in 1960, I went to the Women's Bar Association meeting, and the most honored member was a judge in the equivalent of traffic court, and that was a really big deal. They had different kinds of courts in those days, like superior court and municipal courts, and she was a traffic court judge, and that was the highest ranked woman lawyer we had, and it was very exciting, and it was just to get jobs. And in 1935, the women lawyers, the Women's Bar Association, did a sit-in at the Corporation Counsel's office, and actually my sister-in-law's father was the Corporation Counsel at the time, and he had the police remove them. All they wanted was jobs as Corporation Counsel. Right. He had the police remove them. I just wish he had lived to see both his daughter and his granddaughter become members of the bar. So that's a little aside.
Abby, when you mentioned parents, and Carole mentioned her mother, my connection to the Holocaust Museum is that I was born in Prague, and my father was a lawyer, and we didn't get to this country until January of 1941. My father lost his whole family in the Holocaust, and we obviously had trouble getting here over the time. We left Prague in 1939 after the Nazis had marched in, and didn't arrive until 1941. But my father did not want me to become a lawyer. His perception was that all his doctor friends were able to practice immediately when they came, whatever country they were driven to. They were able to begin medicine very shortly. As for law, he would have had to begin all over again. So I remember in my childhood, he was not encouraging. He wanted me to do something, but probably medicine would have been his preference. So he didn't think that law maybe would translate if we were ever having to flee again. So I had a lawyer in my family, but not one who encouraged me to pursue his profession.
Now, why did you choose law and not medicine then?
Well, the easy answer is I didn't like the sight of blood, and I didn't like chemistry. I started out as a pre-med, trying to please him. But I always was, both my children went to law school, and I was always driven to think of representing injured people, representing people who had no voice. It seemed to me that that would be a very good way to live a career. So what brought me to law school was a rather naive impression of what lawyers did and what law school was about. Because in my first year, I don't remember discussing justice or the needs of injured people. But I was also a torts professor, and we started the health law program at the law school. So I tried to, in my career, I tried to hang on to that early vision of what a lawyer should do. In my view.
Family law, children law center. Yeah. So yes.
That's right.
Well, Carole, you also considered being a doctor, didn't you?
Oh yes, but I did not. I'm like Nina. I did not like chemistry and physics, and I changed my major in my third year and started getting very active in student politics, which I loved. I ran for the student senate and did that, and I found my home. I knew I had to do something. I had to do at least what my mother did, and I did find a home in the law.
But there was a different reason that you were going into medicine, wasn't it? Because your whole family was lawyers too, right?
Oh, my mother was a huge feminist, you can imagine, in 1933. She would take my brothers and I to whatever woman professional she could find. She took us to women doctors. She took us to, we had a woman dentist. My brothers thought all dentists were women. And she was a very strong feminist, and she encouraged me, and I went to women doctors, so I looked up to them. But I'm like Nina, I did not love the sciences.
But Abby, I do need to add that my sister, my baby sister, did become a chemistry teacher. So my father was very happy.
That's great. That's wonderful. And so what other changes have you observed in the legal field, do you think, for women and in general, and for, you know, the underserved in general? There's so much going on.
So, oh my goodness, there's so much going on.
Yeah.
Well, my impression over 45 years at Loyola was that the students were different from the ones that I had known at Columbia. Maybe because of Loyola's mission, that it trains people in the service of others, that Jesuit overlay that the university has. But it seemed to me that my students at Loyola were idealistic, and they came to school with an idea that they were going to make a change for the better. And it was wonderful to work with them because I really felt that they carried that into their practice, so that even when they went into corporate law or whatever they chose to do, a disproportionate number of them continue to serve in public interest fields and do pro bono work. So my impression of students and my impression of young people generally today is that I hope that they will work towards a better world than the one that we've experienced. I look at the marches that we've seen, the passion that they appear to have in that generation for the rights of the disadvantaged and the underserved. And I'm filled with a lot of hope that we will see not only a better world, but a better legal profession, that they'll take some of this passion, come to law school, work to change the law, work as legislators, because that's where the real change can happen, and go on to do what their march tells us they want to do, find justice for those who have not had it. So I'm encouraged. My sense of the younger people is that they will make a difference. Carole, do you agree?
Absolutely, and it's hard for people today to realize that in Illinois, women were not allowed on juries until the modern age. I mean, there was such terrible discrimination against women throughout, and now to have a law student have any dream that she wants fulfilled is so great. It should be noted that 3 out of our 7 Illinois Supreme Court justices are women. And now there is no limit because of your gender. And that is so wonderful to see. It's just heartwarming. And look at our Congress, look at our political leaders now. It's time that we're moving up, and we're moving up.
Right. And of course, our actual Supreme Court.
Abby,
Yeah.
Now that you mentioned the Supreme Court, I know that people have dialed into this program to hear about Ruth Ginsburg.
Yes.
I called our Assistant Dean for Students, Jean Gaspardo at Loyola, to find out what Ruth had done in our summer program in Rome. Ruth Ginsburg and Marty came to Rome to teach in Loyola's summer program in Italy.
Wow.
And they both spoke. And then in 2000, that was in 2009, and in 2018, Ruth and her daughter Jane came in and gave some lectures to the students. And my friend Jean Gaspardo was reminiscing about Ruth. And what she said about Ruth, she got to know her during that time. Ruth was so modest and open and willing to share personal reflections with the students, and took pictures with anyone who wanted to take a picture with her. Marty and she were joking with students. They were reflecting on their lives. She talked about the cases that she felt were the most important cases. And Jean was left with the impression that she was just open to young people and was willing to share everything that she knew with them. She was struck with her generosity of spirit. So since we're honoring Ruth and thinking about her, I thought we should recognize that was always the case with her. And even as she became older, she still retained that generosity of spirit, which is one of her biggest characteristics. Carole, you agree? I know we've talked about
Oh,
that.
absolutely. But
Yeah.
I'm just always in awe of Ruth. She is
Me too.
a great inspiration.
Oh, we do have another minute. Let's, Wendy, if we could put up the letter that Ruth sent to Carole. Do we have that, Wendy?
We sure do. Here you go.
Let's show this letter, and maybe Carole can tell us a little bit about getting this letter from, this was from Columbia University in 1975 to Carole. Can you tell us about this, Carole?
I can. At that time, we needed 38 states to pass the ERA. We had 35, and Ruth was really wanting that major push, and she did get the organized bar support for this, but she was so concerned about getting the last 3 states. And as we indicated before, it was 50 years later when we got it. And she was trying to have us focus on the ERA rather than some of our other resolutions. For example, we had a resolution like to decriminalize prostitution, to decriminalize victimless crimes. That was one of our other issues in the ABA at that time. Oh, we also had a resolution at that time for non-discrimination because of sexual orientation. And she really wanted us to focus on the ERA. So, but she did get the support of the organized bar for that. But believe me, as one who asked the House of Delegates to support some of these liberal positions, in 1975, it was quite an issue, but not the ERA. The ERA was not that controversial in the American Bar Association, even though that was a very conservative organization at the time. They did support it.
Right. And for those of you more interested to hear more about the ERA and some of Carole's work, we have another event on August 25th, where Carole will discuss her personal debate with Carole, with Phyllis Schlafly on the issue. Because she did debate her here in Illinois. If anybody has seen Mrs. America, Carole was a part of that. So
Share the screen for that.
And the movie got it right. The movie got it right.
Yeah, that's just a picture. That's an upcoming. That's a picture of Carole and Phyllis Schlafly debating here in Illinois. So that's pretty exciting.
It was quite an experience.
I would imagine, because she was something.
But they did a wonderful job with the movie.
Yeah,
they really caught it. They really caught her.
It was quite a time, and it's so amazing that it didn't pass and that we finally passed it 50 years later.
Yep.
It's really something. So is there any further advice or any further words of wisdom for younger women trying to come into the bar today?
Just don't give up. Follow your dream. I said that earlier. Follow your dream.
Yeah, which is what I told my daughter when she entered the profession, and she has done that. So she's still practicing in Houston, as is her husband.
And Nina, any further information? The last time you saw Ruth, I mean, what other things have you done with her personally throughout the years?
Well, sadly, we're both widows now, but at Columbia, while we still had husbands, we went out together, and Marty and Al were good friends. And so we just knew each other. Of course, looking back, I knew she was a brilliant person, but I did not know, as she did not know, how far her intelligence and her personality would take her. She has become a living icon and a symbol for all of us. I think that's reflected in the registration for this meeting. Unfortunately, many people could not get on. So there are even more people who are probably in her fandom.
Yes. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, anymore.
Yeah. And so throughout the year, were you aware, well, clearly we know about her fandom because we have this wonderful exhibit as well as the book that came out about the Notorious RBG. Could you have ever suspected something like this?
Well, she was always a modest, quiet person. And some of the women in our class were far more extroverted. And we had another person who went on the bench, Marie Garibaldi, who became a Supreme Court justice in New Jersey. Each of the women in the class were there for a reason. So many of them did go on and have careers. And I don't think we could have imagined at that time that the Supreme Court would even have a woman. That was so far beyond our imagination. We never had a female faculty member, unlike Northwestern. Right. So it was something that we could not even think of. There were no bathrooms in the law school for women. We shared it with the secretary. There was one place, and that was where all the female secretaries would go. So it was such a different world that I think Ruth would be surprised. I have heard her say, she did say, that she never thought that at her age, young teenage boys would be dying to have a selfie with her.
That's just wonderful.
Which is true.
Did you ever have any idea that she was doing not only her work, but Marty's work while he was sick?
No, that reflects her modesty and her loyalty to Marty. She didn't speak of that. He was brilliant. Marty was a wonderful, funny, brilliant tax lawyer and just a wonderful person. But they had a seamless marriage. And it was, I remember when she spoke at Loyola several times in Chicago. And I do remember there were so many alums who wanted to see her. It was a 2-hour reception line. And Marty stood there holding her handbag so she could shake hands with everyone. That was pre-COVID. So he certainly was a supporter in every way. And she reciprocated, of course.
Oh, that's just wonderful.
Yeah.
Great. Well, Wendy, can we start taking some questions?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. First, I want to tell you fabulous ladies who are path makers, as RBG would say. Thank you. There are so many wonderful comments coming in. Everyone is enjoying hearing this, your reflection so much. So thank you. This question, we're not going to get to every question, but I'm going to answer, I'm going to give you a few. Were your classmates supportive of each other, or was there significant competition between you and your female classmates?
I'll take that. No, we were bonded together very, very tightly and have remained friends after graduating. In fact, I still see, I have to sadly say, the surviving alums. We just had our 60th law school reunion. I did say 60. I can't believe it, but it was 60 years. And I still see them whenever I go to New York. We have dinner together. So no, there was only goodwill and support over our lives.
How about the men? Were any of the men supportive?
Some of the men were supportive. Absolutely. Absolutely. There were some who were not, but gradually we didn't pay attention to that. We just kind of brushed it off. It was nothing that caused us pain. I can't remember feeling terrible about it. I just thought, what a ridiculous comment to make, that kind of thing. But it wasn't something that caused us pain.
Was that true at Northwestern, Carole?
Well, we certainly weren't invited into the fraternity, the legal fraternity that kind of was the center of the school. But I'm still we only had 2 other women that graduated when I did, and I'm still very close to my friend Barbara, who's been with the DOJ for 60 years. I'm still very close to her. And our other female classmate became an appellate judge in Illinois, and she's now retired. But the guys were okay. I know I had my bars study group was all men, and we did fine. We used to meet at my father's office to study for the bar exam together. So I don't remember hostility from the guys because of our gender. I don't remember that at all. Other than we wouldn't even think of being invited to the law fraternity. It never occurred to us that we should have. So,
Carole,
I mean, a lot of
happily, Columbia did not have a fraternity. I would have been locked out of it too. They didn't have one.
But the guys were fine. You know, most of the three of us were really right out of college. I did not think they were nice to, we had one law student who dropped in maybe in our second year. She was a WAC. She was in the Women's Army Corps, and her devotion was to the Army. And she was brilliant. She would leave for several weeks to do her war games and come back and take the exam and blow everybody away. I didn't think the guys were that nice to her. She didn't have civilian clothes, so she would come in cocktail clothes to school, and they were not nice. I don't think the guys were nice to her. She was older. I hope she finished law school. She was absolutely a brilliant student.
Thank you so much. So I have another question that I think is important, and here we go. Sadly, sometimes feminism forgets about Black women and women of color. What advice do these wonderful experts have for merging feminism and anti-racism work? What are the best solutions for getting more representation of women and women of color in all areas of law and government?
Well, I can speak for law schools, certainly, and Loyola has made a concerted effort. We have a new dean, relatively new dean, Michael Kaufman and Jim Ford, who are both extending themselves, Sasha Coupe. They spend a lot of time and work in recruiting minority students and valuing their contributions to the school. I know that we've set programs for diversity and support in the law school, but I'm not familiar with what's going on a day-to-day basis. But Loyola has seen an increased enrollment in minority students.
Any thoughts, Carole?
Yes, I think we'll go back to the old consciousness raising movements in the 60s. I think we're seeing real consciousness raising about racial issues right now and diversity issues. And it's just so heartwarming to see the protesters in the street for the Black Lives Matter movement, including every kind of person, every race, every ethnicity. And it's happening, and we just have to be aware that this is an important priority. We've got to make the legal profession look like the rest of society. And that's always been so important.
Thank you so much. What do you think is the most pressing issue for women today? It's a big question.
Well, it's a good question. There are obviously balancing questions that always occur. How do you do everything at the same time? Raise children, have a profession, devote yourself to public life if that's your choice. That, I think, most of the time is a private decision that has to occur between, if there's a marriage, in the marriage itself, and in society, we have to try to provide childcare. I think that's a huge issue. It's not limited to legal professionals. I think it's a huge issue that we see now. People have no place to leave children while they're working, and professionals are not exempt from that problem. So I think that is an issue, what to do with your children when you're trying to pursue a legal profession. But that can be an issue for a man as well. It's not limited to a female issue. It's a marital issue or partner issue.
And I want to follow up with what Nina said. Lawyers need more flexibility to attend to their personal lives. And the fact that we've been stuck at home for 5 months and are able to do so much work online is really exciting, I think, because women lawyers do need more flexibility. If they have children, it's really hard to put in the 80-hour weeks. And I think that the law firms need to be cognizant that men and women need time for their families, and they need flexibility maybe to work from home 1 or 2 days a week. I don't think that would hurt their quality of their work. I think we've seen it now. My son-in-law just tried a case online on Zoom this week, and I think it works really well if the law firms are willing to go along with some flexibility. It will help the men and the women be able to fulfill their family duties.
And I think the other issue that I think is facing the legal profession, as it does in so many other professions, is accessibility to education. If you live in a small town and you're not near a law school, how in the world could you possibly think of having a legal education? As I earlier said, the Jesuit law school started evening part-time programs. Loyola is now doing online education. And we have a program which is directed to professionals who don't want to practice law. So if you're a hospital administrator, this is our health law program, you can come in for a 2-year degree. It educates you in specific areas of the law, in this case, health law, anything to do with medical issues. You're not going to practice law, but you'll be a better informed hospital administrator. The idea behind that was to make it more accessible to more people who could not afford a 4-year part-time program. So my second issue, when we go beyond children, and I'll include elderly parents, because we have the sandwich generation, people who have to try to raise children while supporting people of my generation and thinking about aging parents. I think the second issue is accessibility of education. And I think maybe that what we're seeing with the advances in online education, bumpy as they are, they're not perfect, may in the long run open law education to more people, which in my view would be a good thing.
And I would just add, because it's important no matter who you are or where you are, for women, is the Me Too movement, which is current and happens in the law all the time, much more than you think. And is very important. It's very current, and it continues. Right. Continues to happen right now.
Thank you. We only have time for one more. There were so many questions, but we do have a question that wraps back to the ERA. What do you think is going to happen with the ERA? Do you think it will get passed or added to the Constitution?
I'm going to defer to Carole, who's had so much experience.
I will say this. I hope so. We have the 38 states that have passed it. And I think some of the issues are distractions, which could be cleared up by Congress. One of the distractions is that it had to be passed by 1982, I believe, but that was put in by Congress. Can Congress repeal that? Another question is whether those states which have rescinded it after they passed it, whether that has any bearing on the 38 states. So it's still a work in progress, and we can only hope that it will be held valid. But again, we have to have another Congress before we can really address this.
Well, thank you guys. We appreciate having you.
Wendy, may I just say one last thing?
Absolutely. We'll take as much as we can get.
I wrote to Ruth telling her that Carole and I will be participating in this program. And just in case she's watching, I just want to send her all of our best wishes. Come for a very speedy, complete recovery. And I hope that she enjoyed what we had to say. And I hope to see her very soon back in Chicago.
That is wonderful. And we did thank you so much. We are recording this program. Many people in our audience this afternoon asked about that. So please let her know that we will share the recording with her if she is not on right now, so she can enjoy your warm wishes. Thank you for your leadership for women and all that you've done, all three of you power women. And I know I enjoyed And I speak for many in the audience how much we enjoyed spending the afternoon with you.
Thank you.
We're so grateful.
Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you. Please know that
Thank
I'm
you.
just going to make a couple of announcements. The announcements are that in a couple days, you're going to receive a thank you letter in your email boxes. It will have the recording of the video, so please feel free to send it to your friends and family. It will also include a survey. Please take a moment and fill it out to make sure that we're on the mark and we can share it with our generous funders. I put in the chat a little bit ago a link to our upcoming programs. Our next program, in addition to the wonderful program that Abby mentioned, coming up later in the month, we also have a commemoration this Tuesday night at 6:30 p.m. called Combating Hate, Confronting Anti-Semitism and White Nationalism 3 years after Charlottesville. So we're going to continue on, and please know that the museum also is open. So if you are feeling comfortable and want to check out our safety procedures online, please do so. We're open right now, Wednesday through Sundays from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. The doors are closed, but you can stay until 5 p.m. And we
Thank
will
you.
see you again soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
You.
Thanks, everybody.